CanMar Morning Talk Show, a fresh take on what's happening in the global cannabis and psychedelic space. Your power shot of cannabis and psychedelics knowledge, featuring the industry's hottest experts, thought leaders, trendsetters, influencers, and celebrities. I'm your host, Melissa. Join me and our esteemed guests as we reflect on the current and future climate of the global cannabis and psychedelic industry. Today's guest is not only the president and founding partner of Diplomat Consulting, he is also a serial entrepreneur who loves assisting in writing the rules for regulated sectors and is working to define the Canadian cannabis retail sector, the incomparable Nathan Mison. So Nathan, I always love to ask my guests a little bit about their journey getting into the cannabis industry. And of course, you've been in the industry for a while now. So tell us a little bit about your cannabis story.
Yeah, so I come to it through advocacy. I was lucky enough to be an advocate prior to coming to cannabis, specifically primarily around healthcare and agriculture. And I was lucky enough to help out a company in Alberta, the province that I live in, cancel a fairly significant RFP, a lab company, and renegotiate a new contract for them. One of the people who was involved in building that was Harvey Shapiro. Harvey was also the co-founder of Emblem Cannabis at that time. So I ended up starting to do some work with Emblem Cannabis. And then one day he called me out of the blue and he's like, I'm going to build a cannabis retailer in Alberta and I want you to be the CEO. And I'm like, I don't know if I can, I'm the right guy to do that, but I'm happy to have that conversation. And then we started to look for a COO, and it was 7 to 9 stores in Alberta. And then we were luckily enough joined by Trevor Fencott, who came in as the CEO position, which was great because I was not going to be the perfect CEO for that job. And Trevor had just completed the first super deal in the cannabis sector in Canada, where he had sold Metrum, him and Michael Haynes, to Canopy to make them the company. So he brought some real gusto and some institutional knowledge and some incredible connections. And his mentality was, okay, we're going to be 15% market share in every province that will have us, which was very different than 7 to 9 stores. And I was lucky enough to be here in Alberta. I was the only representative in Western Canada. So I did every facet of the job for the first 8 months, except for finance. So real estate, regulatory, communication, branding, stakeholder relations, Indigenous outreach, the whole kit and caboodle, which was an incredible ability to really throw yourself into the organization and the sector. And when we finally settled in and built an organization, my role was communications, stakeholder relations, and government relations, and regulatory affairs. So I was incredibly lucky to spend a lot of time at the forefront of municipalities and provinces onboarding adult use recreation. And then Trevor, who had been one of the founders of C3 in Canada underneath Metrum, believed that we should do the same thing in adult use recreation. So I was really lucky and afforded the opportunity to help start a lot of the associations in the country. I was the chair of the Alberta Cannabis Council. I was the working chair of the Ontario Cannabis Policy Committee on the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. I was the co-chair of the National Cannabis Business Coalition with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and the co-chair of the International Cannabis Council with the International Chamber of Commerce. So that really afforded me the opportunity to really get my hands into it and talk to regulators and represent the whole sector, not just cultivation, retail, but ancillary businesses as well. And it's been an incredible road. I don't think it's not very often that you get to stand up a new sector. That's something that doesn't happen very often ever. The parallel I made is that, this is Canada's internet in a lot of regards, and people forget that at 3 orders of government came together in 11 months and stood up a new regulated sector that is now larger than the dairy industry, or sorry, larger than the lumber industry, and has double the employment of dairy, and as well as 2 taxation regimes. Canadians have never seen anything like that, and being able to be involved in that on the ground level was incredible. And it's been an incredible ride, and a wonderful opportunity to learn in one of the most dynamic sectors I think anybody can ever be involved with.
Absolutely. That's so exciting, to be able to really see, from the inception to how it's grown since then. I think that's very exciting, and to be kind of involved in all of these different things. And now you have Diplomat Consulting. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about your transition from, what you were doing before to starting Diplomat Consulting, and what the company's doing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was my first experience in a startup environment, where we were a startup that had money, aspirations, and success, especially at the beginning days. To go from an ethereal thing where you were out there selling that this was coming and people were like, yeah, to us submitting on March 8th of 2018, 34 applications in Alberta, which was a Herculean effort, to, oh my God, it was insane. 41,000 pages we delivered to AGLC on that day. It was crazy. We had 17 architects working for 10 days straight. And I remember we had 16 lawyers in a room correlating the applications to go in on a 36-hour process. It was madness. But what it allowed me to do was learn lots of lessons. We listed on the TSXV, we uplisted to the TSX in the shortest time in Canadian history. But I was a startup guy, not a corporate guy. So I knew that there was always an opportunity to continue to go and do other things, and transition out. When Circle K came in, Elimination Couche-Tard, and acquired a good chunk of Fire and Flower, it was a good time for me to look at what other options that were out there. I was lucky enough to start Diplomat June 1st of 2020, right in the halcyon days of COVID, which was an interesting transition. And I went out with my co-founder, Lisa Holmes, who's an incredible dynamic woman. And we started a regulatory affairs firm that also did public relations and government relations. And that's been an interesting ride, because we've, of course, the first 18 months we built during COVID. January 4th of this year, Lisa left us to go become the chief of staff for the mayor in Edmonton, the city that we live, Amarjeet Sohi. And we were incredibly blessed that Ivan Ross Farana, who brings 18 years at Health Canada and Finance Canada, and Evenco and Rand Hill and Knowlton's came and joined us as the managing partner. So, we're a regulatory affairs, government relations, public affairs organization. The real easy way to say is we enjoy writing the rules. We, of course, are very heavy cannabis focused, but we think one of the things that's really unique about the cannabis experience is it should be a model for all emerging sectors. Did we get everything right in cannabis? Hell no, of course, right? But we got more right than we care to admit. And the world and technology moves much faster than it used to do. Psilocybin, the province that I live in, January 16th will have the first provincially licensed psilocybin clinics in the world. Lab-grown meat move fast. So our goal is, we call it regulatory foresight for economic opportunity, which is a nice way to say we enjoy helping write rules with clients in advance of where the rules are going, or we actually influence the rules to create things that don't exist. And a great example of that would be cannabis tourism and hospitality, which we are very actively involved in helping shape those rules. So no, Diplomat has been an incredible ride. It has been an incredible treat of working with great people and great clients and working on great projects. And I'm very blessed that I have great partners who put up with my crazy whims and ideas. So they're very supportive of all the wonderful things that we want to do and how we want to try and change the world one piece at a time.
I love that. That's amazing. You have to have a good support system, right?
I've been lucky to be an entrepreneur for a while. It took me 5 partners to find the one that actually fit, right? I think we live in a world where we're so afraid to fail. And I would say I have fallen on my face harder than most, but been incredibly lucky that I have a very solid personal life. I've been with my incredible wife for 22 years, that I always had a home-based partner while I was looking for my work-based partner. And, sometimes when you find the person that's right, it's amazing what you can do when to your point, you have that support at hand, that you can push as hard as you want because somebody will catch you if you fall. And it's okay to fall because you don't do crazy new things without falling once in a while.
Absolutely. You have to take that leap, right? You just have to put yourself out there. And just to touch on something that you were talking about the psilocybin. A lot of people are saying this could be the next emerging market, right? I mean, you're already seeing it up there in Canada. What are your thoughts on the future of psilocybin and kind of the psychedelics industry as a whole?
So I think psilocybin is an incredible wonder drug. But medical primarily. I think there's lots of incredible applications that it will be able to treat people that have PTSD, anxiety, depression. I think there is an incredible opportunity for us to really reevaluate between cannabis and mushroom-based psilocybin, botany, and the role that it plays in actually bringing healthcare, therapeutics, and wellness to the world. But I see a very long road for adult use psilocybin. I think regulators are going to be very fearful of that, and politicians are going to be fearful of that. I think, you're talking a decade for that kind of thing to emerge. But I do think from a pharmaceutical therapeutic wellness, that it is an incredible opportunity. And as we come out of COVID, considering there's lots of places that are still being smashed in the world by it, or the flu, anxiety is probably higher as a population base than it has ever had. And looking backwards to therapeutics and botany products of the past to help us with the challenges of the day is pretty exciting. So I'm very excited about the opportunity for psilocybin to help make the world a little bit of a better place, a little bit more patient, and a little bit more happy. And I think the world probably needs that in a pretty big way. And therefore, that's why I believe that psilocybin will continue to explode around the world, both in Canada, the United States, who have been really the leaders in the space. But if Canada and the United States kind of makes a right way, incredible opportunity to see its application grow in other markets around the world.
For sure. As you said, it will be a long road. I mean, we've seen enough kind of struggles with cannabis. So this is, taking things to the next level. So it'll be interesting to see where we head to in the future. Of course, you've been very busy. You mentioned a lot of these kind of foundations and the Chamber of Commerce and all of these initiatives that you've worked with. What do you think is the importance of these kind of initiatives in driving forward, the policies and regulations within the industry?
Yeah, thanks it's a great question. And I think it's a really important one that we need to spend more time talking about. So one of the things that's really unique about Canada's experience with adult use recreation is we're the first G7 and the first G20. Canada is a unique nation in the fact that we have the world's largest economy south of us, who has an incredible capitalistic engine below it. And why I bring that up is because we were in violation of 3 international treaties when we legalized cannabis, the world wasn't involved in the cannabis experience in Canada as much as it was. And because of federal illegality in the United States, Canada was a little bit on its own. in that regard. And it actually did something incredibly exciting from a Canadian entrepreneurial economic opportunity, which is we had to build our own supply chain, right? Canadians do not build supply chains because the Americans usually, or international actors, bring in their different businesses, different supply chain pieces, so on and so forth. Canada really had to develop its own accountants, lawyers, packaging companies, construction companies, so on and so forth. And that's very unique in Canadian economic development. And what that afforded us the opportunity is a couple of things. One of the challenges when you're representing something that's new, especially something that has such established stereotypes that are attached to it, where an illicit market can do whatever the hell it wants, is when you go meet with policymakers or politicians, the first thing that you got to get over is the tropes of the past, right? And so the challenge of being a cultivator association, a retailer association, is people think you're coming in there and whining for better policy to allow kids to smoke reefer with those rastas on the street. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the conversations we have. So why we chose the Chamber Network as the primary focus of our association. The Alberta Cannabis Council was not underneath the Chamber Network, but a lot of the rest of our work has been, is all of those chain-based, or those supply chain businesses, traditional economic actors, were already members of the cannabis, or of the Chamber of Commerce. They were traditional businesses that were doing cannabis revenue, and that revenue should matter to them. So what our aspiration was to find a place that was safe, that you could bring them to the table with the cultivators, with the retailers, so that the accountants, the lawyers, the construction companies, the packaging companies, security companies, so on and so forth, that really diverse sector would be side by side, so that when we created advocacy, it was with advocates that politicians and bureaucrats already knew and already felt comfortable with, so that the cultivators and retailers could have hidden a little bit and let those guys lead, have the conversation, and then bring that expertise of what they were seeing on the ground from a cannabis sector. And I think that's really important. And I think we've seen the success of that and some real change that we've been able to afford underneath that model in Canada and in different provinces. And I think, you know, we're now at an apex point in the Canadian cannabis sector, where there's an opportunity for us to see fairly significant advancements through a lot of the government structures that are going. And I believe that those associations that we're a part of, or other affiliated like C3, like the RCCO or the RCCBC, there's an opportunity for us to actually come together and advocate for change. But I really focused on making sure there was a home for places where they were doing cannabis revenue, but they were not cannabis companies, so that we could change hearts and minds, because holy hell did politicians make it freaking hard, because they really believe the tropes of the past, right? Like, it was insane, some of the conversations we've had. I've had ministers of finance tell me there was no illegal cannabis in the province. I've had to argue cannabis policy with people who have a level of religiosity that makes it where I know that I'm not going to be able to convince them no matter what, because I'm representing the demon reed that is corrupting children's souls, right? Like, that's a pretty tough place to change hearts and minds. So, you know, by bringing a wider base with a wider voice with people that they know, I think we've been able to achieve greater ends to move the sector forward.
Yeah, I think that it's a very blinkered view, and once people have those kind of blinkers on to that kind of degree, it's very difficult to change the minds. It's that stigma that still kind of hangs around the cannabis industry. You know, I mean, even though things have moved forward in a lot of ways, there is still a lot of stigma. So besides like associations like this that you've been speaking about,
can I just Can I just start to interrupt for 1 second? Because I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind. So recent polling by Abacus actually shows that 73% of Canadians support cannabis legalization, and 67% believe that we should actually 67% believe it's the greatest accomplishment of our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and the Liberal Party. And 54% of Canadians believe that we should actually be promoting the sector more on its success. So I didn't mean to cut you off. The reason that I think it's important is the majority actually have moved on. The real challenge is we're representing the minority, which were disproportionately represented in our elected politicians and our bureaucrats who are afraid of risk and getting in trouble from our elected politicians. If we actually acknowledge the fact that Canadians have moved on, and it's not just us, America, cannabis is the most universally popular public policy and actually has broad-based support between Republicans and Democrats. As I'm sure you've seen, you can't get broad-based support on anything between Republicans and Democrats. So the real challenge that we need to realize is we have to overcome the stigma of a small group of people who are not representing the citizenry. And I think that's an important thing for us to make sure we represent, because 73% is a fairly large number, and that is continuing to grow. So it's not like it's not popular, and we need to make sure we yell that from the rafters so that people realize that, hey, it's okay, politician, to talk about cannabis or actually make cannabis friendly changes, which could unlock the economic opportunity or maybe steal a little less from your government regulated monopolies, that you could give a little bit back to create actual private sector healthiness and sustainability, because the citizens actually back you up. So I apologize cutting you off, but I think it's a really important point to kind of keep in mind.
Absolutely, and that's amazing. I mean, I think those kind of statistics speak for themselves, right? So that's amazing, and let's hope that those numbers translate on a global level, in the future. We have our own kind of challenges here in South Africa with our legalization and whatnot. So let's hope for like 70-80% on a global scale. That would be incredible, right? What are your thoughts on that?
It'll take some time, but the benefit is, Canada has a fairly good reputation internationally, overall. I believe we're one of the top 3 well-respected countries in the world. And, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah here. Dogs aren't marrying cats, cats aren't marrying dogs, right? Like, it's not cousins getting married in every chapel, right? Like, there's not car crashes every day, everywhere because of it. So I think the fact that you can point an example to a well-respected country that it hasn't had the impact that people thought it was going to, and that the Canadian citizens support it fairly well, should give people hope that even though we did things wrong, it's still done better than people think, as the first nation in the world who was G7 and G20. And we always got to give credit for Uruguay for going first, but Uruguay unfortunately is not Canada. So I think there's a model there, right? That's one of the true benefits of being in Canada, is that we're going through the 3-year review right now in our 4th year, which is oxymoronic, but that's a whole different conversation, to actually see what we did right and what we didn't do right. And in true Canadian style of confederation, we have 13 different provinces and territories in this country who did 13 different models of wholesale and distribution that other countries can look at, grab from, and decide what works for them. And what fulfills the goals of their own objectives of why legalization will come. So, 55 nations around the world are going through cannabis legalization right now. And I think, it's not only a huge economic opportunity, but a real opportunity to maybe change the conversation about wellness, therapeutics, and citizen happiness. And in a world that we live in right now, maybe a little bit more happiness and kindness and a little bit more chill would make the world a little bit of a better place. So I'm proud of the Canadian leadership on that, and I'm proud of representing a product who I actually think can make that difference around the world.
Absolutely. And, as you said, there's not anarchy out there because of cannabis legalization. And as you said, there are lessons that the rest of the world can learn from what Canada did right and wrong. That's a great segue into the next question I wanted to ask you. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on some of these lessons that can be learned? What did Canada do right? What did Canada do wrong that other countries could potentially learn from?
So I think the first thing that I'm actually going to speak to is I think something that we did right, that is something that we have to keep on in the future. In our Senate, we actually built in a 3-year review of the Cannabis Act. I think that it was a brilliant move when, you're standing up something for the first time ever and you're building a whole thing on assumption. What an incredible opportunity to use real world data after the fact to see if it validates your assumptions. So I think, that was a great accomplishment. But what I actually think what it's shown me after being involved in the review process is that in our first 10 years, we should probably have triannual reviews for the first 3 reiterations so that we can continue to get it right. So when you go through your first review, the sector doesn't look to try and hit a home run and get everything right all at once, because there's that tension between politicians, bureaucracy, and what the sector wants and what the citizens actually demand and what they're accepting as well. And I don't think any of those parties are going to be happy 100%. So keep the opportunity to look again when you're setting up something that's as different as this would be a real win. And what that allows us to do is talk about the real things that are wrong. I actually think, surprisingly, the government, Health Canada, and the provincial regulators, and again, 11 months, 3 orders of government created this model with 2 taxation regimes. That's unheralded in Canadian history, that you can move something that fast. Like 3 orders of government at a municipal, provincial, and federal level don't come together ever that quickly on stuff. And I think we got 60 to 70% right. The challenge is on the 30 to 40% that we got wrong. Is it okay that I swear?
Yeah, go for it, please.
Okay. The 30 to 40% we got wrong. We got really fucking wrong. And the benefit from a policy point of view is it's so wrong and so egregious, it should be easy to fix, right? Because you can point at it as so egregiously wrong that it's like, and then you put it in comparison to other sectors, or just when you talk about things out loud, people are like, holy shit, that doesn't make sense. So, I think that we're at that point right now where there's things that just don't make sense. Like, in a confederation, the provinces are responsible for healthcare. They created provincial wholesale and distribution. We have a variety of different models. Well, man, the provinces are just taking so much money off the top, right? Between a province that will take between 40% to 50% off the top to 70% off the top before it goes to a retailer to sell money. How do you displace an illicit sector where you're not allowed to talk about your product? You can't compete on price, and you can't compete on what the kind of product that the consumer wants. That's a very difficult place to change consumer buying patterns. And considering one of the justifications of the illegal sector legalization was to eliminate the illegal sector, we've done a terrible job on it. And it's government policies that have got in the way of that, from overtaxation at a federal and provincial level, an excise tax at the feds where they set it as $1 a gram on a $10 gram. Well, you can now produce a gram for sub $3, but the $10 or the dollar is still the same. So your taxation's at 130%. Like, that's just asinine, right? Marketing rules that make it more restrictive than alcohol, and alcohol and tobacco. I was lucky enough to be in the adult use recreation space, and people would come in to the stores, and they would ask for three primary things. And this is exactly what Colorado's experience was as well. I was lucky enough to be down in the States. And it's three things that people want to come in to talk about: pain, sleep, and anxiety. New consumers want to talk about those things. You're not allowed to talk about those things in the adult use recreational space. So, who is helping them with that education? And that's because the government has abdicated that role on that when it comes to education, even though they're taking money off the top to do that. There's lots of things that we can fix. The benefit is, and again, they're so fucking wrong that it should be easy to fix. Like, one of my favorite examples was during COVID, Ontario gave delivery to the cannabis sector. This was adult use recreation sector. So these are people who had worked incredibly hard, going through an arduous process to open a legalized store with all of that costs that go along with that. And they were told you weren't allowed to do delivery. Okay, even though the illegal sector was delivering everywhere. And so they decided that they were going to give legal stores cannabis delivery, and then they took it away. But they gave it to all other retailers except legal cannabis stores who had to displace an illicit sector. My favorite example is a moored boat who had a liquor license was allowed to sell alcohol and deliver alcohol, but a legal cannabis store would not be allowed to. That is an egregious example of a policy fail, and that should be something that should allow us to get change. So I think there's lots of that examples, and I believe that the government is much more willing to listen. And I think one of the other true lessons is it is an economic sector as well as wellness and a new inebriant. And Canada absolutely failed. There is not one provincial or federal ministry until this year that had cannabis as an economic engine or an economic observation. And the thousands of new jobs, the billions of dollars of investment, nobody gave a shit about. And when you can't talk to policymakers and bureaucrats about the jobs, it's much harder to argue. And I think that is something that we've fought for 2.5 years to start to change. But if South Africa called Canada today and said, we want to talk about your experiences, government to government, the Canadian government would say, no, thank you, because cannabis is still not in the mandate of Global Affairs Canada. So all of these nations that are going around the world, the Canadian government will not talk about it. That's asinine, right? So crazy. There's things we can change that the benefit for us is they're so obviously wrong that it should be easier when we start to talk to politicians and bureaucrats, and we start talking about the economics, and we start talking about the fact that it's not Sodom and Gomorrah, and we start talking about the fact that cannabis consumers are not what people think they are, right? So I am a statistic junkie. I enjoy statistics, and I have an incredible team that arms me with statistics. So just as a quick thing, because I think it's important to say, the average age of consumers in Canada is 37 for cannabis in Canada. The largest demographic at 40% is 35 to 54 is the largest demographic of cannabis consumers. 51% of them are female. 63% of that 51% are married, and of the 49.8% of consumers in Canada have children. And the last one that I find, because it's crazy, again, an aberration, is 29% of new cannabis consumers have a graduate degree, right? This is not young men getting blitzed, sitting in a thing. They're honestly staying in the illicit sector because the legal sector does not have the product that they want to have. And we've made it so hard for them to actually talk to them, sell to them, give them the dosing that they're looking for, so on and so forth, that they've unfortunately stayed in the illicit sector. That's something we have to fix in the next go round. And therefore, what it's allowed us to do is really have a different demographic. 37 is a voter. at all three orders of things. That's an engaged situation. 29% have a graduate degree. That's crazy. That is a disproportionately high statistic that it should be an aberration. That a 29% educated female voter of the age of 37 is a voter. So, I think we have to continue to tell those people those things and mobilize not only the politician to realize the aberration, but that 37-year-old who we can arm to give them that conversation, to be like, why the hell are you getting in the way about this? We don't care about it. And I think we're close to actually starting to change some of those egregious policy decisions at a municipal, provincial, and federal level to create a sector that we can then export to the world or use as an example to those 55 nations around the world that are going through the process.
Wonderful. And I think it is important, as you said, to mention those statistics, because statistics don't lie. These are facts, and these are the things that we need to take into consideration moving forward. I completely agree with you. And
they're government statistics. They're from Stats Canada, so it's like your own statistic organization. It's not the cannabis sector coming up with statistics that you don't believe in. These are your own statistics. So that helps us out as well as advocates, and also people from around the world that can point to that, because you have a validated statistic that the government cannot refute. Because that's one of the challenges that I think is happening in the States, is that, at a state by state level, you're getting that thing and people don't believe the statistics at hand. Ours is from Stats Canada. If politicians want to disregard that, that's okay, but it's your own information that we're using for advocating for change.
Yeah, which is very ironic at the end of the day. But talking about how Canada is, kind of this world leader and innovator in the cannabis space, and the lessons that the world can take from what Canada has done right and wrong. But how can Canada kind of remain as a leader in this cannabis space as all of these 55 nations move towards legalization? And what will Canada's role kind of look like in the global marketplace in the future, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, the cannabis sector in Canada is unfortunately going to have some real hard conversations. We're a northern climate. Our energy is expensive. We have high ESG standards. We are going to have to evolve from being a cultivating nation to an IP research and productization nation. There's an incredible opportunity, if we get out of our own way, to see Canada be a brand nation. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, where I think there's an incredible opportunity, is cannabis tourism and hospitality. I think cannabis is like an iceberg. We're still only 4 years in, right? Like, that is still a very early days. Where 8% is above the surface and 92% are still below. I believe that we've probably only displaced 50% of the illicit market, and I think in certain provinces that's probably high. I think it's probably 30 to 40% in some markets that have as robust of an illicit sector as it is. Or legacy sector. I think cannabis tourism and hospitality. So Canadians, we probably only have 30% of the Canadian population who have tried cannabis. At the high side in Canada, which means 70% have not. That same group, Abacus Research, did a study on consumption, and it showed that 66% of first-time Canadian potential consumers would like their cannabis to be through ingestibles, right? That is not combustion. We have told for generations that smoking is bad for us, so they're never going to transition into a joint, right? Like they just won't. And it's an interesting conversation because cannabis tourism and hospitality, I believe, is food and drink based, but it's also it's food and drink based, but it's also spas, massage, therapeutics, so on and so forth. And considering the world has just been beaten up when it comes to tourism and hospitality after COVID, and the world is looking to rebound. Again, I know the Canadian statistics because I'm that geek. The Canadian tourism and hospitality sector contributed 105 billion to the Canadian economy in 2019. In 2022, it was 50 billion. We lost $55 billion of economic impact. That's a lot of restaurants. That's a lot of hotels. That's just a lot of things. And the other challenge that goes along with that is it's also the largest employer of the underemployed. So 18 to 25 in Canada are averaging about 14.8% unemployment. And a lot of those use the service industry as a way to get into the sector. So as the service industry has been destroyed, we unfortunately have created an opportunity where young people don't have a bridge to come into the actual workforce. And as the only G7, G20 in the world, still the only federally regulated, again, not Uruguay, primarily the only federally regulated nation in the world. What an incredible opportunity for Canada to actually write the rules again on what cannabis tourism and hospitality is that becomes the basis of it. Because I would imagine sitting in the sunny climes of South Africa, that tourism and hospitality would be an economic driver, and creating another opportunity to add a differentiation to that tourism and hospitality where you can have local products, local food, local experience that are completely and truly only for yourself is a really interesting one. Combine that with the fact that there's a research group out of the United States that showed that 27% of worldwide travelers want to have a cannabis experience when they arrive in that jurisdiction. That means 27% of worldwide travelers currently are trying to have an illegal experience because there isn't places where you can have a legal experience. Canada can be the leader of the world of an emerging tourism and hospitality. And of those 55 nations, half to 2/3 are nations where tourism plays a disproportional role. And I think that is an incredible opportunity for Canada to lead. And we're pushing really hard on that. Where it's new jobs, putting people back to work, people who are taking retail spaces again, building restaurants, the capital investment, working with travel and transportation companies, all of that excitement that Canada had, which has really been beaten up. It has been a tough road in the Canadian cannabis experience, from great highs to great lows. There's an opportunity for us to revive some of that optimism by bringing new entrants back into the sector, and letting politicians understand it's just not more people getting high, it's people using cannabis in food as a food ingredient or a wellness product, or having a spa experience, or using it as a therapeutic, or using it as a wellness opportunity. And I think that's a great opportunity for Canada to lead. And that is what my hope and aspirations, that I play a small role in making that happen in my own country and abroad in 2023 and beyond.
I love that, and that's very interesting because I have also been kind of reading and hearing a lot about the cannabis tourism or Canada tourism and this whole kind of idea, and I think it's amazing. And even in South Africa, as you said, tourism does play a big role. We have that's also taken a knock because of COVID. So to reap, and our economy isn't in the best of states as it is. So something like cannabis or even Canada tourism could make a big difference for us even as well.
And to that point, I think it's a really important one. And a great example in South Africa is those traditional economic actors who have good relations with politicians, hotel chains, transportation companies, airlines, restaurants, so on and so forth, can go and talk to the politicians and be like, hey, we're not talking about people getting them schmammered. We're talking about spa experience. We're talking about a fine dining experience. We're talking about, and because the economic sector is depressed, politicians are looking to try and help that sector. And I think, unfortunately, it's a truism, but it's hard to say sometimes because it comes with great pain. But out of great crises comes great opportunity. And I think, cannabis acceptance and economic opportunity and global penetration potentially can really move the sector forward through cannabis-based tourism and hospitality, because tourism and hospitality is an economic driver so much around the world, and those participants have real political sway, and we just have to work together to mobilize them to add their voice to the cannabis sector so that they listen to politicians. And again, same as we talked about the chamber, taking traditional economic actors and getting them to add to their voice creates opportunity for change. And that's why I actually think cannabis tourism and opportunity will create more movement on cannabis legalization than adult use recreation, because it's not smoking. And it'll be harder for health organizations to get in the way of it. And then the other one that I think is a really exciting thing is it allows you to have specificity at home, right? Because, we'll use Jamaica as an example, right? Jamaica has a very long cannabis history. There will be flower and genetics that will only be in Jamaica. So you can fly there and have that product in that goat curry grown by grandma in that village that you could only have in that space in the world. That's a level of specificity that doesn't happen very often. So, I think that's a way that we can really sell the experience, the opportunity, while putting local people, local product, local chefs, and local cannabis to work and create political and economic momentum to actually have cannabis legalization move much quicker than it already is moving quickly.
Amazing. I completely agree with you, and I think it's very exciting. And on that note, I was also listening to a podcast where you were talking about cannabis consumption lounges and cannabis catering. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that, and what is that kind of looking like in the Canadian space, and that whole kind of situation?
We actually have cannabis catering, home-based cannabis catering approved in almost every province now. There was always a pathway for it. The challenge is, as much as people want to say, well, it was already regulatory approved, you still got to talk to the regulators to make them realize and be comfortable with it, right? Like when you're trying to do something first, it might be the case, but you still can get your hand smacked if you do it the wrong way and don't tell the powers that be that you are doing it. So we're actually going to be announcing the launch of a cannabis catering company soon with a national purview. And concurrently, we believe that there's enough room, Diplomat does, and we've written quite a bit about this on our insights page on our website, that there's enough room under the province and the federal government that you could actually do consumption lounges right now. There's no zoning for it at a municipal level, right? So there's no, cannabis restaurants or cocktail bars or coffee shops. How far do they need to be away from a school? Can they be close to a library? Can they be, all of the normal things that we have to go through? So we've been actually meeting with a number of municipal leaders from across the country to have that conversation with them about the creation of zoning, as well as the creation of licensing at a municipal level. We had a very encouraging meeting at the city of Edmonton, the city that I live. Edmonton is actually coincidentally going through a comprehensive bylaw review for the first time since 1959. So we actually believe that there's a real opportunity to actually get cannabis consumption zoning in Edmonton by Q2, so that Edmonton could be the first municipally, provincially, federally approved jurisdiction in the world to allow cannabis consumption sites. So that's not as far away as people think. And that's, again, new businesses that don't have to be just about inebriation, right? Like I believe that there is an opportunity to have cannabis infused cocktails, but CBD coffee, like that is something that has popped up around the world. The one downside of coffee, as we're probably both drinking it, is anxiety. CBD has a natural proclivity to reduce anxiety. If you could take all of the positives of cannabis and put an anti-inflammatory, or sorry, all of the positives of coffee, put an anti-inflammatory that's an anti-anxiety, that sounds pretty amazing. And jurisdictions around the world that have done CBD coffee have seen an explosion. Why can't I go get a massage that has cannabis lotion, right? Why can't I go have a spa experience that instead eucalyptus, they use a cannabis infused terpene instead? Those are questions that when you ask a politician, they're like, why can't I? That is a really interesting question. So I actually am very encouraged that I think not just cannabis consumption, but cannabis use at a municipal level is not that far away, not only for ingestion, but therapeutic use. And I think therapeutic use is a easier sell to get us cannabis consumption. And I believe that there's great opportunities. And I can't wait to figure out who's the first hotel in the world that has a spa that I get to go stay at and have a cannabis food infusion, drink infusion, and then a spa experience. I think that sounds pretty amazing. And I think it's 2023, you'll actually see that happen. I really believe we're closer at hand. I know those are experiences that are happening in other places, but they're not zoned federally or they're not zoned municipally. This would be the first 3 orders of government that would have that zoning and regulatorily compliance. And that's pretty bloody exciting. And I think that's, again, an opportunity for Canada to show that leadership.
That's incredible. It's and as you said, it's all about curating that kind of experience and seeing that it's not just about some teenager smoking a joint in their local park. That's the world of cannabis is much, much bigger than that. So I think that's really incredible. And talking a little bit about 2023 as we are steadily approaching it. Anything else that you'd like to share with us about what you've got coming up in 2023, maybe for Diplomat Consulting, maybe some other projects you're working on?
Yeah, there's lots on the go. So, we're very excited that Diplomat will continue to grow. We have an opportunity to continue to define ourselves and our product offerings and potentially bring new partners, more opportunities to work with other emerging sectors like psilocybin, lab-grown meats, EVs, hydrogen. Like the world is moving faster than our politicians and our bureaucrats can keep up with, and somebody needs to help create that economic opportunity for us to do that. So, I think that's something that will absolutely contribute to. I think the other thing that will be a big thing is 2023 is a pivotal year in the next phase of not only Canadian cannabis, but I think worldwide cannabis. We have the cannabis review in Canada. We have CBD CHP coming up. So that's phytocannabinoids, non-cannabinoids, or non-psychoactive cannabinoids, a regulatory regime coming around that. We just had a Supreme Court or a significant court ruling that talked about medical products, the use of cannabis in animals. Like all of these things are next year. So I think 2023 is a great leap forward. At the end of it, we'll look back and say, as big of 2018 was, which was, of course, the first year of legalization in Canada, 2023 will be the next reiteration of Cannabis 2.0. While my estimate is, I bet you'll see 10 to 15 new countries come into the cannabis legalization circumstance. And the one that I'm watching very closely is India, right? Fascinatingly enough, another Commonwealth nation, same judicial system, relatively same parliamentary system, has a central health organization. And I don't think people realize is it actually has 2 cannabis policies on the books, one that makes cannabis illegal and one that makes cannabis legal. And if you remove the one that makes cannabis illegal, you open a marketplace of 1.5 billion people, and that is bananas. So, I think the domestically emerging sectors and internationally, 2023 will be an epochal year in the evolution of cannabis as an economic, therapeutic, and an inebriant.
Amazing. Yeah, that's very interesting about India. I'll definitely be keeping a closer eye on what happens over there, for sure. So Nathan,
they need money too. Like you talked about South Africa, right? Like money becomes a hell of a motivator for politicians. So
yes,
yes, we got to keep that in mind. That's a wonderful thing. So yeah.
So yeah, that basically does bring us to the end of our time, and that kind of covered all the questions I wanted to ask. Is there anything else that you would like to add to our listeners or viewers before we kind of wrap things up?
Well, one, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always great to talk about where we're at, lessons learned, and where we're going. If we don't reflect on the things we did wrong, we can never fix and bring solutions to the problems at hand. So thank you for that opportunity. It's very tough right now in the cannabis market. There's a lot of people that are being hurt very badly who took a great leap forward in the sector, and that is incredibly painful to watch, and it's really shitty that that is going on right now. Hold on, because help is close at hand, and once we get out of this tough times, there'll be incredible times ahead. The cannabis market continues to grow. It's not like it's shrinking. Revenues are continuing to go up when it comes to actual citizens, not companies. Canadians are embracing cannabis and continually. The world is embracing cannabis continually. And if you're able to hold on, there is bright times ahead. And anything that we can do to help with that, both at Diplomat, the associations that I'm involved with, or some of the other incredible people that are in the space, because it is a pretty incredible space with great people who actually want to see people survive and be successful. Reach out, because you're not alone. The cannabis sector is one of the most inclusive ones and the most hospitable ones I've ever been attached to. And it's tough right now, but you've got support, and good times are closer than you realize.
Amazing. And I think that's very true. It's all about working together in this industry, where we have to work together in order to move things forward and help each other out. So really, really lovely sentiment that you dropped there, Nathan. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. I really enjoyed hearing everything that you had to say, and I'm very excited to see all of the things coming in 2023.
We look forward to sharing them, and you can always find us on diplomatconsulting.com. We're really proud of the insights that we push out. My partners are very kind to try and share support with the sector. So if you need some good statistics or a little bit of some of that optimism, please find it there, because there is good things coming, and I really appreciate the time and conversation. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nathan.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching or listening to the CanMar Morning Talk Show. Join us next time for your weekly dose of cannabis and psychedelics updates from the industry's experts. But wait, before you go, did you know that CanMar is leading global change within the cannabis and psychedelics industry? We are building customizable ecosystems, providing solutions to recruitment, offering regulatory and compliance services, and community hub for the global network. Some might say we are the future. If you haven't already, download the CanMar Hub app or check out our website at canmar.io to see what we're getting up to. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button below to hear more juicy insights from the movers and shakers of the cannabis and psychedelics industry. Until next time, Stato.